is Barb McKee.
Okay, let's see if I can remember this after that schmozzle now. My whole computer crashed. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, my journey into this story was pretty convoluted, and I went in many different directions. But I am excited by where I have ended up. I began this particular story from the perspective of someone who understood what it meant to be a minority. Because when I was a missionary in India, I learned what it felt like to be one of the few instead of one of the many. Had I not experienced that, I probably wouldn't understand the whole idea of privileged culture that most of us live in and don't even know it. And also, having understood quite a bit about missionary work and having taught in that area for a long time, I also know the complexities of many different worldviews and how you can have to swim between them. And unfortunately, early missionaries did not do that. Their goal was in all parts of the world. Colonization happened in India. Colonization happened everywhere. And I saw the remnants of that when I was in India. So I have pulled together a story, and I will just say that this is a heart story. I have tried to make it as close to factual as I could, understanding what I've come to understand. But I'm sure there are areas where it's not going to be accurate. I'm hoping that the heart story comes through. So I will begin. I came to Aurelia in 1840. But for a good amount of time before that, I was struggling, trying to understand what had happened to me over the past 2 years. My husband was dead, and I was trying to raise 2 teenage boys. My husband, John, died in a confrontation in India, where we were missionaries. To this day, I don't really know what happened. All I know that, unfortunately, a conversation with a Hindu man ended very badly. My boys, who had once been very open-hearted and open in their spirits, were now quiet and sullen. I was hoping that coming to Aurelia would be a new start for me. We'd been given a patronage. We would have land, and we would have a home, and we would be in an established community with other people and near a pretty little lake. Of course, I should have known that things would not be as they seemed. The first place where I saw that was on our voyage. We ran into a hurricane on the east coast of this new land called Upper Canada. It was early in the season, but it was a terrible windstorm. The wind blew for days, and waves as high as 10 meters bashed our ship. We were locked into our place of living for 3 days. And in that time, the roaring winds and the rocking ships made us all sick and uneasy. My boys hardly talked. And I realized then how weak I was without John by my side. Traveling on land wasn't much better. We finally docked in Montreal, but we then had a long voyage of uncertain lands, and we were stuck many times in the mud. But finally, we made it to Aurelia on a warm, sunny day. The place where we would live was near the Narrows, as it was called. We weren't right on the water, but we could see it. We had heard that the Ojibwe people were causing trouble, even though a treaty had been signed and agreed to. We were told that the Indians could be savage and violent, and we should be careful, and that we should report if we saw them on our side of the lake. Our homestead was a half-built log cabin and a wigwam. There were many trees on our land, so it was hardly cleared. But with the help of the neighbors, my sons were able to finish building that log cabin. The wigwam stayed because the boys thought they could make use of it. Not long after we got there, I had been approached by some of the townspeople. They had heard that I was a missionary. And excuse me, and they asked if I might help. They thought perhaps I could teach some of the children. There was talk of building a church. Well, there was a lot of interest at that time in our God between the natives and the settler peoples, but the tensions were getting higher and higher every day. More and more settlers were coming, and the cleared land that they had been promised was not always there. Chief Yellowhead and other leaders in the Indian community were fighting for what they said was their rights. They had not received money that they had been promised in the treaty. There were a lot of skirmishes breaking out, and people were afraid. I did not want to become embroiled in another situation that was not of my making. But as a woman, I really didn't have very many resources. Not long after we came to this land, I always had the feeling that there was something or someone around, but I was never sure if it was really something happening or if it was just my frayed nerves. But then one day I was out collecting herbs and I looked up and there she was, a young Indian girl. She knew that I had seen her, so she stood her ground. "I am Miigwech," she said. I had been prepared to yell for help, but when she spoke English, I wasn't quite sure what to do. So instead of yelling, I said, "I am Sarah." She waited for me to make the first move. As I started to approach her, she ran past me into the woods. But it wouldn't be the last time that I would see her. Over time, she came more, we talked more, and I understood that she must have been watching us because she always knew when I was alone. She would come and sit in the wigwam. She seemed so at home there. Well, I would be disturbed by every little sound that I heard. One day, my curiosity pushed me to move into the wigwam with her. When I went inside, I was surprised at how roomy it was in there. Yes, it was a little dilapidated. There had been animals nesting in there, but it was still pretty cozy. So I sat down. "Do you know this place, Miigwech?" I said. "Yes," she said. "This is my place. This is where I am known and where I know." And a tear ran down her face. I couldn't help but being charmed by this young girl. She was not a wild savage. She was a free spirit, and she was hurting. Over the next month, we met many times without others knowing we were there. And we accepted each other, and we shared our stories. She told me that her parents were dead and that the Deer clan had been broken apart by war and sickness. She didn't know where many of her kin were anymore. She said this had been their land and that they had been happy here. But now the pale man's ways were causing problems. These treaties, she said, promises are not being kept. They tell us we should farm instead of hunting. Our people are not following their own ways anymore. And we are hungry, and we are afraid, and we are getting lost in this. I told her my story of a land far away, a land that I didn't know, a land where I had gone and lost my husband. And I told her that I too was missing family. We met together many times and we shared many stories, and I understood very quickly that she knew much more about this land and about how everything worked here than I did. She told me that the land gave gifts, and in return, the people looked after the land. She knew what would happen in every season. She knew all the animals around. And even as we sat in this wigwam, she could tell me what animals were around and what they were doing without even being out there. She was so at home in this place. And listening to her made me realize what it felt, that I wanted to feel what she felt about what it was like to have home, to be known. One day, she just left and never came back. I don't know what happened. I don't know where she went. I never saw her again. But her influence on me was deep. When I was asked again whether or not I would be willing to teach the children in this new church that was opened, I was still unsure. I was questioning my beliefs. Her story made me think of the original garden, the Garden of Eden, where people were given the land to look after it. And I understood now that what should happen was that people should learn to live in unity together, one with another. But I didn't know how to teach that. And I wasn't sure if I could. Miigwan had not been at all what I expected she would be. And the only way I came to know her was to sit with her and listen. If only people today could sit and listen as we had, to go on a journey together, perhaps then we might have a chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you for persisting with the story, and thank you for coming back when the computer crashed.